I sin, but I still believe. I still believe. Through the pain, through the grief, through the lies, through the storms, through the cries, and through the wars. No, I still believe. These waves to cover me. I've turned and tossed upon the waves. When the darkness comes, I feel the grave, but I still believe. I still believe. Through the cold and through the heat, through the rain and through the tears, through the crowds and through the cheers. No, I still believe. Faces that I meet, I feel like I wanna go home. What do I feel? What do I know? But I still believe. I still believe. Through the shame and through the grief, through the heartache and through the tears, through the weight the years. For people like us, in places like this, we need all the hope we can get. No, I still believe.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the stream. I'm back with Branch Brothers. Let's get the call going on Discord with Rick. Let's make sure I get the audio capture set up. Alright, looks like... Oh! Oh, I forgot about that.
Forgot about what?
Um, because I forgot to turn off your avatar on the screen for you're showing up as your character with the priest outfit right now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to move? Do you want to use Anime Priest for this, or do you want to use the? Do we just want to do the Discord capture?
We can leave the priest up. I think it's fitting given the subject matter. If it was any other character, I would say no, but because I'm already in priestly garbs, I think the it's fitting.
Fair enough. All right. In that case, I will just disable the Discord footage capture, and there we go. So now we just have me, you, and the chat.
Yeah, could you just move me to like the center of that window there since there's like nothing there?
Um,
Oh. Actually, wait, put me more in the like yeah, somewhere there.
right
Good.
here.
To the right of the clock. That's good.
Okay.
Where I'm right now, wherever it is, that's good. Leave it there.
All right, we'll do. So this week I've read through the book of Esther. What did you cover this week?
So for today's topic, I'm be covering Song of Solomon.
Oh, that one.
Mm-hmm.
All right then. You know, it's there's a funny story about that. I had to read a book in community college for my English class for the Gen Eds called Song of Solomon. It was in no way related to the biblical Song of Solomon. Of course, when I told my mom about that, she was like, "Oh, I had to cover Song of Solomon when I was in grad school." And then we found out that we were talking about two entirely different books.
What are the odds?
Right. Um, Esther's pretty short, only about 10 chapters long. How long is your segment?
Well, Song of Solomon's only eight. I do like a brief summary of the book, and then I go into a couple things. So no, I mean, not terribly long, I would say.
All right, in that case, let's why don't you start us off?
All right, sure. So, for those who don't know, the Song of Solomon is one of what we would consider the wisdom books of the Bible. These are the kind of books that aren't very narrative or historical focused, but more so are there to sort of teach some kind of lesson to the readers, whether it be the people of Israel back then or us today, in this case. So, Song of Solomon, while attributed to Solomon, the actual authorship I think is unsure. People just assume it's Solomon because it's called Song of Solomon, although it could have been someone around the time who just used his name. Although I will say this, he does get referenced in the third or fourth chapter in Song of Solomon, so there's direct reference to him there.
Cool.
Yeah, so basically, with Song of Solomon, there's basically three ways to read this book. One of them is it's either one of three things. So it's either A, the relationship between God and his people, or in by extension, mankind. Two, a human love poetry between man and woman. Or three, the relationship between Christ and his church. And you could really read this book either one of them or really all three different ways. I want to skip to point number two because it's probably the most obvious of the three, being between man and woman. And it's curious to read it this way because not only does it focus mainly on these two lovers, one male, one female, as not intended, but also the language they use to describe one another, especially in like physical ways, is, shall we say, a bit mature. In fact, upon a first reading, if you don't have the proper maturity, you can get quite the chuckle out of this one.
Yeah, there's actually some versions of the Bible will omit this book actually because of that.
Yeah, and when it comes to ancient times, people would actually not read this book or wouldn't be allowed to until they're of a certain age or maturity. Because, especially if you're a teenage boy, it's very easy to see some of that stuff and take it a little out of context. So why don't you make sure that you're in the right space when you're covering that book?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that probably was obvious there. But with points 1 and 3, you can see both ways too. Um, because throughout Song of Solomon, the man is constantly pursuing the woman, constantly like trying to win her back and get to her. And God is in many ways the same way. And God is constantly pursuing us. We don't have to earn his love because his love is freely given to us by virtue of us being his creation. He already loves us. and he loved us first, most importantly. So the true question is this: will we allow him to love us? It's kind of in the same vein that I talked about earlier in terms of allowing God to forgive you. Like, will you? He wants to forgive you, but the real question is, will you allow him to do so? Because God can pursue us all we want, but at the end of the day, it is our choice whether or not we choose to walk with him.
Yeah, that is certainly true. Unless you're a Calvinist.
Story. Yeah, and I think in terms of Christ Church, it's kind of the same way where the man is willing to sacrifice for the woman, and later on in the Bible in the New Testament, I forget which letter it was, but one of them it says that a man should love his wife as Christ loved the church, and he should sacrifice on behalf of his church. That's how Christ loved his church, and we men are called to be the same way towards our own wives, well, married, of course. Um, and there's one particular moment I want to point out is how there's two things really, two additional points. So the first is that the woman is always remains the master of her own mystery. The man can knock, but can't force his way in, because in chapter 4, he actually knocks on the door and waits for a response. So then she has two options. She can either choose to let him in or keep him out. And it's always a risk for the man, because especially situations like this, it's always the man who takes the first step when it comes to any romantic interaction. And yet, more often than not, you have no idea how the other person, how the woman is going to react, because she could go one of two ways. And there's obviously a risk there, but there's also a bit of excitement there, because, of course, if it doesn't work out, all we can do is move on there. But if it does, it could be the start of something truly beautiful. If you plan out right, of course.
Yeah.
And there's one other point I want to make clear, and I think is very, very important. Is that husbands and wives must first see each other for who they truly are, then each other for who they mean to each other. And what I mean by that is who you are to that other person is secondary to who you are. More importantly, your relationship with Christ, with God, triumphs that, because first and foremost, we are sons and daughters of God before we are anything else to either ourselves or to each other. And I think, especially in the context of a marriage, this is why it's so important, especially as a Christian, to have God at the center of your relationship. Because God, whether you're married or not, should be your number one priority in life, your number one love. Because as I mentioned earlier, He loved us and loved us first. And we are called to willingly choose Him and to reciprocate Him, to be in relationship with Him. And this should be the case whether you're single or whether you're married. And if you are married, it's important for both the husband and wife, each other, to recognize that as they go in. Because
Right.
what can happen is when you don't do this, you could actually end up idolizing your spouse. And once that happens, that could be very detrimental to your marriage. Because what happens is that you can stop seeing them less of like a person, and you end up seeing them more as like some perfect godly like being. And when they screw up and you don't have that godly focus in your marriage, it can lead to a lot of problems. And in worst case scenario, the ending of the marriage itself. But when you have Christ at the center, you make him the focal point through, because with him, all things are possible. And through him, you can better work things out, the problem, and it'll be, more importantly, be easier for you to understand that, hey, this is another human being, a great person, but also one who's made good but has problems, who's not perfect, might have issues, and as their spouse, as their husband or their wife, I have to acknowledge that, and I need to be ready for whatever comes. And I think it's important that you guys keep that in mind with each other as you navigate through life as a married couple.
Yeah, and if I'm remembering the gospel correctly, Jesus even said that he would basically pit father against son, daughter against mother, husband against wife if they were not focused on him above all else.
Yeah, even today, we're seeing families getting torn apart because one side of the family is choosing to walk with the Lord, and the other half's just doing whatever they want. It's sad, it's tragic, but I think you make a very excellent point there, is that Christ does not come here to just be friendly with everyone. He came here to save all of us, but to make a final proclamation to save us from sin. But like I mentioned earlier, we have to choose to walk that path. He can't force us to make us, nor does he want to. God wants us to choose him. And especially, and this is why when it comes to marriage, it is so important to find someone who shares your values, who's walking the same walk you're walking. You don't want to be with somebody who's doing the complete opposite of what you're like. It's one thing to marry someone who's maybe a bit neutral, not as sure, or even moving towards the faith. It's a whole other can of worms when you're going with somebody who's not in the faith and completely opposed to it.
Yeah, I've seen rare instances of it working, but it's not advisable for most people.
Yeah, especially since at least if you're Catholic, we do allow people to marry, and the church does allow Catholics to marry outside the faith, whether it's a different branch of the Christian tree or even outside the faith. However, in that scenario, it is entirely on the Catholic member, the family member, to raise the person as Catholic, and the other partner in question needs to be willing to allow the Catholic parent to raise their children as Catholic. Because if they're not, again, that can lead to problems. So it's very, very important to keep all of this in mind as you're looking for your special someone.
Right.
But yeah, that is the gist of it. I think that's basically everything. Like I said, the book's very short. There isn't much going on there. But I think at the same time, because it is in the Bible, it is the inspired word of God, that it is divinely inspired. There's a lot to learn from here. And I think it's easily one of the most valuable books you can read as a Christian, especially if you're one who desires to be married.
I would argue it's the second most valuable, the first being the gospel. But no, there is definitely a huge benefit to reading Song of Solomon, or as it's known in some prints, Song of Songs.
Yeah, of course. And now, no means to discredit the Gospels. They are super important. They're definitely the number one. But Song of Solomon is way more important than a lot of people give credit for. Because some people they look at some of the lyrics and they just like read it just to like laugh at it and stuff. But like if you look at it, you have the right maturity, and you actually critically look at it. There's a lot to gain from here.
Yeah, if you look at if you read the first few pages of this and you're chuckling to yourself like Beavis and Butthead, you're probably not ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
Um. All right. So should we move? So now should we move on to Esther, or do you have any further closing thoughts for Song of Solomon?
I think I covered basically everything I want to cover. So I think we can move on to Esther now.
All right. Now this week I read the book of Esther. As mentioned before, this is one book in the Bible where God is not specifically mentioned by name. In fact, I think it might be the only one, though I'd have to double check that. It's
At
ulti-
least in your canon, of course.
yeah. It's ultimately a story about how you can't outplay God, with Haman being the object lesson in the dangers of pride and envy, as it's this mindset that drives Haman to conspire to destroy Mordecai and the rest of the Jews. As Mordecai demonstrates that even if we are loyal to God and kneel only before him, we will still face adversity and hardship. As it was Mordecai's refusal to kneel before Haman, along with Mordecai's exposal of an assassination plot against King Xerxes, that led Haman to conspire against the Jews in the first place. It was thanks to Esther being favored by King Xerxes and becoming queen um, that led to the king listening to the claims presented by Mordecai. Um, I did not structure these notes very well. Um, Yeah, no. I'll go. I'll get back to testimony after completing the synopsis. Returning to the events of the Book of Esther, the book makes a point to mention that Haman would cast a lot to decide when to carry out his plan, and the lot fell on the number of the 12th month. Now, 12 holds a great significance in Judaism, as it is a number signifying authority. And so on the 12th month, Haman goes before the king with his scheme, telling the king that there are people conspiring to undermine his regime who live separately from the people of the kingdom. The king is at first swayed by Haman's words, and when Mordecai learns of the plot to eradicate the Jews, he instructs Esther to appeal to the king, and Esther demonstrates the virtue of sacrifice. She is initially afraid of this task, knowing that anyone who goes before the king unannounced will die unless the king extends mercy to them. Mordecai has to persuade Esther to go anyway, as the consequences of Haman's conspiracy against the Jews will not be withheld from her simply because she is the queen. I think it's this that sways Esther, as when thinking about it, it seems to be a no-win scenario. Esther accepts that death is coming for her by either the king's hand or by the hand of Haman, and meets with the king. And because Esther had been favored, the king will. And because Esther had been favored by the king and has previously proven loyal to him by working with Mordecai to stop the assassination plot, the king shows her mercy. Esther goes on to reveal Haman's plot against her people, and the king is so disturbed by this that he orders Haman be given the execution he had in store for the Jews. Now, in some translations, it is said that he is impaled on a pole, in others, it is said to be a gallows. Either way, we see that Haman has fallen on his own sword, both spiritually and physically, as it was his sin that drove him to this end. After this turn of events, Mordecai takes Haman's place as the king's advisor, and the Jews in the kingdom of Xerxes went on to help the kingdom win many battles. A lot of the events in Esther may seem to be driven by coincidence, but I've found throughout my life that usually when a simple event has such a profound or prolonged chain reaction, it's quite often the hand of God at work. In fact, back in 2018, when I was struggling with almost everything, I was wondering what led to us living in California and why. Because ultimately we came here because Dad left when I was about 3, and that led to Mom ending up in grad school. And then after she completed grad school, she met her second husband, and that was how we ended up in California. And I just didn't get why California of all places. Lo and behold, though, us being here would ultimately lead to me learning more about computers in high school after my friend got me interested in them as a hobby. I ended up and it would have been much harder to track down my dad, who has been a solid support for me. And I don't know if I would have actually met Rick had my life played out differently, because part of what led to us meeting each other was becoming friends on Micah's server. Um, I actually left the trade school that I was getting certified at early to pursue law enforcement, and it was around this time that I actually abandoned my pursuit of God. I didn't really well, not so much abandoned. I didn't concern myself with it. I was more following my own plan at that point, and that ultimately ended up shooting myself in the foot. Um, I don't know where I'm going with this. These notes are pretty bad outside the synopsis.
The general idea of what you're trying to say. You're basically trying to say that like everything has happened for a reason, and that had those events not happen, you would not be here today. Would
Pretty
that be
much,
correct?
yeah, yeah.
I figured that's where you were going based on the way everything was written and stuff. And yeah, honestly, I can kind of agree. I mean, the only reason to like a server was because I found it all started. I found like that YouTube video he did where like he whenever like Marvel Comics was failing. That was the first one I ever saw. That was back in 2017. I actually didn't join the Discord server until like a month or two after I graduated from college. That was 2 years ago. And a lot of that was because, after college, my friends and I went to different places across the country because we're all from overseas to begin with. I don't have anyone else to talk to, so I joined Micah's thing, and now I'm a streamer.
Yeah, it's funny how events that seem completely innocuous can end up having lasting consequences, or sometimes when things seem to be completely unrelated, turn out to be um, interlinked if you look back on it.
It's almost as if there was some divine intervention involved.
Right. Um,
I mean, think about it, right? If God could get us to the point where we are co-hosting a podcast for the last 5 months, where else can we go from here?
It's a good question. I was actually asking myself that earlier today. It's like, where do I go from here? Because I feel like Branch Brothers has been our least successful thing, or despite the effort that we've put into it. Um, I know that I will continue to do it because it was something that I was called to, and it would be foolish to just abandon it just because we're not seeing immediate results.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up. I've reflected with God in prayer a couple times about this podcast in particular. And the one he consistently told me was that you and Seth are going to reap the seeds that you have been sowing all this time. Now, as we know, the time's happening right now because we only have like 3 viewers in the stream. And I appreciate each and every one of you, by the way. So thank you for coming. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that like it's going to stay this way forever. Who knows? Maybe we can get I think we could get really big in the future. I think it's just a matter of just being consistent and doing it, even when everything looks like it's not going well. Because more often than not, God tends to work in situations that either don't make a lot of sense or seem kind of like a dead end.
Interesting choice of words there. Oh, I do have other notes here. Um, yeah, Saturday night, I was chatting with Rick here about various topics, including media, how the Word of God has shaped my life, and how the church has made its own share of mistakes. And this led to us discussing how, because man is fallen, even those who pursue righteousness can be wrong. Um, and one of the days I was attending men's camp at Angel Crest, I had been on my way to the cafeteria from our cabin as I overheard a woman talking with a group from another church, and I overheard something that absolutely mortified me. She said, "Why should we be concerned about the environment? The whole earth will perish and be replaced by a new one anyway." I was stunned. I'm not a Gaian, I'm not an earth worshiper, but the earth was made by God and left in our charge. As such, we should be responsible for with it and treat it with the respect that's due. I didn't say anything, but I thought on it, and the more I thought on it, the more meaning I found in the parable of the three servants that Jesus told in the gospel. It's a story about a man who entrusts three of his servants with bags of gold. Two of the servants go to invest the gold, and when the man returns, they offer him the gold and its returns and are allowed to keep the profits from the investment. The foolish servant, however, buried the gold out of fear of losing the man's money. The man rebukes the foolish servant and takes the gold from him. It's a parable not just about being wise with one's wealth, but also about responsibility and how if we are not trustworthy with little things, such as a broken and imperfect world, we are not trustworthy enough with greater things, like the new world that will come with the return of Christ. Recounting this now, I realize that I should probably dedicate an episode to my time at Angel Crest because there's a lot that happened there, and I've only recently begun to realize the magnitude of it.
Yeah, you're referencing an event that quickly. They had to have been more than just a simple day in the lake.
Day in the lake?
Sorry, I meant to say week in the lake. You know, just you go there, you cook some s'mores, you swim in the lake, things like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. The, it's funny, really. My time at Angel Crest, I was actually very dissatisfied with my progress in my relationship with God. And I was doubting that I was actually going to have a mountaintop experience and come back a changed person. But lo and behold, that was what would end up happening. Um, and I didn't even recognize that. I didn't even recognize that it was happening. Because I believe that it was very shortly after that I received the pendant that I would end up sending to you. After I got home from camp.
Wow, really? It's interesting you mention that because I've been praying with that thing every night since I got it blessed. I'm still praying with it to this day, and let's just say since then things have been moving up, getting better. I feel like things are getting in closer, and it truly feels as if God is moving through my life in a truly profound way. Not just through this podcast, not just through other vendors, not just through my work, but in every aspect of life, including things I haven't even thought about until something changed.
Well, that's good to hear, man. I'm glad for you.
Oh, by the way, do you still have the pendant I gave you?
Yes, I do. I keep it with my cross necklace when I'm not wearing it because um, I keep them on a table that my cat refuses to jump on because I had been keeping them on my dresser when I'm not wearing them. Um, but the cat was knocking that stuff off, so I'm like, well, I can't. That is not a toy for the cat, so I've got to find some place he won't get it. Um, but yeah, usually I keep it on in my pocket because I can't wear it around my neck, and it feels a bit weird wearing it around my wrist. So I just keep it in my jeans pocket when I'm not when it's not there in its secure location.
Hmm. I'm glad to see you're taking care of it. That is a holy relic after all. You don't want something terrible to happen to it.
Yeah. Um. Wow, we have only been at this for 30 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, feels a bit early to be rolling into worship. What is there anything else we could cover that we haven't?
Well, I also read through First Kings, so I can talk briefly about that. I want to wait a bit more until I finish like the section I'm on right now, my timeline. But there was one thing I wanted to briefly mention from here. And let me see. Uh, oh, I actually have a lot of notes about God being a promise keeper. I think I wrote this a lot because throughout the second half of First Kings, we go through various different like kings of Israel, and as we established earlier, most of them sucked. They were not good. The Southern Kingdom was a little better early on. There were a lot of good kings, but then things kind of raveled there too. But one of the things that was consistent was the promises God had made earlier in the Bible. One of the promises he made was that the line of David would last forever, that David would sit on the throne. And as we know, um, Jesus came from the line of David. And so there was a particular moment where after the death of King Ahaziah, his mother, Athaliah, who was the daughter of Ahab, who was the king of Israel, as soon as Ahaziah died, she went on and slaughtered basically everyone else in his family. Her own kids, his cousins, they all died. Except for one, a kid named Josh, who was one of Ahaziah's sons. And he was spared. Not only that, a couple years later, when he was 6, 7 years old, he was made the king of Israel. They got rid of Athaliah, and he began to do reforms. But the fact of the matter is God's promise to David stayed true. His bloodline continued. There continued to be kings in Judah. Yes, they lost the kingdom of Israel after Solomon, but they still ruled in the least part of Israel. And that continued up until the fall of Judah at the hands of the Babylonian Empire.
So that was a good long time then.
Yep, and now granted, after Babylon, it gets trying hard to track the genealogy of Jesus, but we know it continued because, well, Christ is a thing. You know, he is still of the line of David. We don't know what happened between like the last king of Judah and Jesus, but we know that bloodline existed up until that point. It
Right.
still continued.
I have some notes here for Job. I didn't complete Job this week, um, but I do have a decent summary of, excuse me, of what happens. Um, let's see. Um, actually, this was written with the context of being in next week's episode, but yeah, screw it. Um, actually, no. This is I'm gonna need to. This is rough draft notes. I don't think I'll cover Job until next weekend.
That's fine. I did want to elaborate on the whole promise thing because it also ties to the necklace I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Because just a couple more notes on here. I wrote a lot on promises. I figured I'd write this up here. Basically, even when if God is so good that even when we fail to be faithful, He is always faithful. He kept his promises to the people of Israel. He kept it to Moses. He kept it to David. He kept it to Abraham. Everything he promised to all those people came to pass, including, of course, the Messiah, which led to the church that we have today. And and I said this before, and I'll say it again: if God made a promise to you, He's going to keep it, even if you initially doubt it at first. It is going to come to pass because God is not a liar, and He would never tell you something or promise you something that He doesn't think you can do or that He is not planning out for you. So just trust in Him and love with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and have comfort in knowing that you don't have to fear for the future because He's got it all planned out. He's got it worked out. You're in good hands.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, at the risk of, I think we'll just roll with the fact that we didn't cover as much today, and just go into worship.
I mean, to be fair, we ran for nearly 40 minutes. I think that's pretty good. 40 minutes of lecture plus his 20 minutes of music. That's an hour. That's perfect.
20 minutes of music? Huh.
Yeah, doesn't worship usually run for about 20 minutes?
I don't know. I've actually never gauged that.
I mean, I went in the past streams. I looked. I'm sorry. I know we're going off script, folks, but at least the videos I've seen, it usually takes about 20 minutes to go through all 4 songs. So we usually do 4 a week.
That's true. All right then. I will disconnect the call and get the lyrics up on the display.
All right. See you later, guys.
Here we go. All right. Gotta find the dang thing first. There it is. Let's start with worship songs. Find it. You know what? Let's start with Ready the Way. Slideshow, start from first slide. Tab out. Footage capture. No, not that one. There we go. And then audio capture. Open with media player. Here we go.
Ready the way of the Lord. Ready the way of the Lord. A voice cries out in the wilderness. Ready the way of the Lord. Let every valley be filled. Let every valley be filled. Let every mountain be humbled. Let every valley be filled. Here is your God, coming with your vindication. Look and behold the saving power of God. Strengthen the ones who are weak. Strengthen the ones who are weak. Say to the frightened, have courage. Strengthen the ones who are weak. Here is your God, coming with your vindication. Look and behold the saving power of God. saving power of God.
All right, that was Ready the Way. Now let's move on to our second song. Let's do To You, O Lord.
To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul, my God. Your ways, O Lord, make known to me. Teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth, for you are my God, and for you I will wait. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul, my God. Good and upright is the Lord, He shows us the way. He guides the meek to justice, He teaches the humble to follow His way. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul, my God. Your way, O Lord, is kindness to those who are true. Your friendship is with those who love you. You reveal to them your word. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul, my God.
All right, that was To You, O Lord. Let's move on to our third song. Excuse me, I seem to have tabbed out to the wrong application. There we go. Hi, Kyrie. Didn't expect to see you here. Welcome to the stream. Happy to have you with us, even if you're lurking. Oh, we don't have an actual lurk command set up yet, unfortunately. I still have to figure out how to do that stuff. Alright, let's move on to our third song. Let's do King of Kings. Did I put... Now, I have the lyrics transcribed. Do I have the MP3 on here? Or in this folder? No, but that's okay. I can actually just pull it from my music library. Here we go. Let's open this with Media Player. Pause that. And start from first slide. Oh, that's loud. There we go. kings. Let's move on to our fourth and final song. Let's do... Let's do... worship songs. Let's do The Calling. Open with... Oh wait, hold up. First, close this slideshow and open the other one. Start from first slide, tab out, open song in media player.
I've seen the other side. It's not what the world wants you to believe. No, no. I've traveled far and wide, and I've learned that things aren't what you perceive. It's just like taking all your stride. Keep running for the light and looking for a sign. The plan is real alive because you have the calling. Keep running for the light and looking for a sign. The plan is real alive because you have the calling. Whenever the lights go out, it's impossible to find the way. We start believing doubt, our weakness as our minds It's as good as you want to be. Keep running for the light and looking for a sign. The plan is real alive because you have the calling. Keep running for the light and looking for a sign. The plan is real alive because you have the Keep running for the light and looking for a sign. The plan is real alive because you have the calling. Keep running for the light and looking for a sign. The plan is real alive because you have the calling. Keep running for the light and looking for a sign. The plan is real alive because you have the calling. Keep running for the light and looking for a sign. The plan is real alive because you have the
Alright, that is it for our worship songs today. I am going to very briefly grab something to eat because it is now 6 where I live and I need to have some dinner. But we will be back with the To Be Continued podcast shortly after that. Hope to see you all there.